Welcome back, Season 2 of the Relationship Blueprint, Unlock Your Power of Connection. And today with us, we have this wonderful clinician. She is a senior faculty member, a clinical instructor, and someone who is my mentor and dear friend. And I'm so excited that she's going to be with us today. And what your specialty is so unique within our organization, because you were the co-creator of the course, which is Connected Parents and Thriving Kids, which is based on the book by Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt, which is Giving the Love That Heals.
Right.
And it's so exciting to think about as a couples therapist, the couples that come to my workshops, and once they start to realize how their parents influenced their experience in life and their relationships, there's not one that doesn't say, my God, what am I doing to my kids? So with that in mind, I just want to ask you, and I want to mention too, you've been married 52 years.
I've been married 60 years.
60 years. We need to update that on your website.
Yeah.
60 years. And you have 10 grandchildren?
We have 10 grandchildren. And at this count, we have 6 great-grandchildren.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, your story, you and Larry. But I want you to tell us anything else that I left out about you that feels really important for our listeners to know.
I think when you quoted what parent couples say,
yeah,
gosh, what are we doing to our kids? That is the phrase when we were doing couples workshops. Larry and I did a lot of couples workshops, and that's a theme that I kept hearing when we were guiding them to understand the ways in which their childhoods affected their marriage and their relationship. That's the theme we kept hearing, and that's what motivated me to move in the direction of doing something directly to parents dealing with their kids and to try to change the trajectory. And yes, it was concurrent as it happened. We had that motivation, and then Harville and Helen wrote Giving the Love That Heals, and they clicked together. So it was a long, slow process, and
wow,
where we are.
I want to tell you something exciting. I was speaking with a colleague, Ava, in Austria.
Yes.
And do you know what she's doing, her project?
I don't.
Well, she's been a nurse, obstetric nurse. And so she's creating a course for parents before the child's born until 2 to support parents through that really, really challenging time. And we were speaking about you and your course and what a wonderful natural flow it would be for them to move from the one area of support, holding them through that challenging time, and then moving into Connected Parents, Thriving Kids. So
yeah, I think I did read something about it on the web, on the internet, and I think we're designed to not have to remember vividly. Sometimes, childbirth itself, it's really quite amazing what we are able to somewhat forget. And I think the early days and months of an infant's life and the early years are so demanding and challenging. And of course, Connected Parents, Thriving Kids does talk about infancy and early childhood, and it deserves focus, the focus that Ava's giving it. So that's great.
Yes. I think so. It's in a hospital setting because she works in a hospital. So it's a very different paradigm. But what I wanted to say today, so I have a couple ideas before we get started. I just would say that for myself, parenting, no matter how much knowledge I have, developmental psychology and years of working with children, even before I became a mom, it is the most challenging job and most important work I've ever done. Most important.
Right. It's the most important. And I think the metaphor that this is upriver prevention instead of the downriver cleanup. So
tell us more about that. Tell us more.
That the idea being, instead of waiting till you're an adult and married and having trouble in your relationship, that if you can be a more conscious parent, then the chances improve that your child will grow into a conscious adult, a more conscious adult, and be more ready to take on the challenges of relationship with awareness and with health, with a balanced, healthy countenance, instead of having to act out more of the childhood trauma than is necessary. I don't believe that the best childhood avoids the inevitable challenges of a relationship. That there's always going to be growth opportunities embedded in a relationship, an adult relationship, and we will be affected by our childhood. And if the parents of young children are more aware of those children's needs, the other thing about this is, when people come into the parenting program, when I came into it and began to examine what was missing in the work that we do, really, it informed my couples work far more than I had anticipated. I knew that I was wanting to help parents work with their children, but I didn't realize how much more I would understand about the work I do with couples by delving deeply into this phenomenon of human growth, human childhood. It's hard to language it. As you know, Coco, it's an experience. And when you have the opportunity to discover the bits of information and then apply them, it awakens aspects of conscious awareness that have been dormant.
So let me just get to some really important points that you've made and maybe get some clarification for our listeners. When you use the word consciousness, I think that word is used often out there, but do we really know what it means? Like to move from the unconscious to the conscious. I know that in our field, that's just how it's our language, but in the world out there, it's not the language. So can you help us understand how in your course that I or anyone in your course can move from this unconscious state of my parenting into my consciousness?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. The way I am using it is that I know that as a physical human, I am influenced by what my body holds. I'm influenced more by what my body holds than what my brain holds. Studies show that it's something like an 80-20 ratio. So the brain can have a lot of understanding and a lot of information. And when a very strong emotional experience occurs in the body, it tends to overrun the intellect and the knowledge and the information that I hold in my brain. So it's like the brain whispers and the body shouts.
Wow. Could you say that again? I love that.
It's as if my brain whispers. It gives me information, but my body and my emotions shout, and they override. Often, if I'm not working with effort and focus, my emotions will override what my intellect has as information and understanding. So
let me see if that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, and then I'll come back.
What you're saying is so rich. I just want to slow it down a little bit. So what I'm thinking of is the client who dad leaves at 1 and the child, the brain doesn't remember. The brain's been told this is when your dad left. But that then the adult child is in my office and talking about how fearful they are about people leaving them, even though perhaps their partner is so committed to them. And yet they really can't seem to make that connection. But I think what you're pointing out for us is that the body remembers the leaving, the body, the little body. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to make sure we got that.
It's an important distinction between the terms we use, that I use, are the implicit and the explicit. I think that's from Daniel Siegel. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But implicit is what the body's holding. Explicit is what we remember. So people will say, well, I don't remember. And I understand that they don't cognitively, mentally remember, and their body does. That feeling that I'm going to be left or that I'm not worthy of staying with becomes a belief that is not understood and it doesn't make sense on an intellectual level. And yet the body insists.
Yeah. So the body remembers. So the implicit memory is what the body knows that the brain, the explicit memory can't recall, but it's there and we feel it. And are you saying that in therapy or in really your course? I mean, the course is educational. It can be therapeutic, but it's not considered therapy.
Not therapy. Mm.
Right. It's educational. And what I love about it too is that you don't ask anyone to share anything they don't want to share. Take them through the process and it's up to them how much they want to share. They're still going to receive so much from the course, right? Just by being there and participating and doing the exercises. Is that correct?
I would say it is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I find that people tend to be willing within the safety of the course to share their particular challenges. Really helpful to the other members because then you will discover you're not alone. You're not the only one who fill in the blank, So
So I think that feels really, really important. Then so leaving so when people hear about conscious, unconscious, what this course can give us is the tools, the path to sort of say, oh, I wasn't aware of this thing that happened and how it may have impacted how I relate to others, but also how it may be impacting how I parent.
And that awareness can go a long way. And it doesn't go the whole way because I can know it. I can have realized that I grew up with something in the environment, some part of my environment that I really don't like. My dad, I grew up with a father who I adored and could be so delightfully warm and loving and affectionate. And he was given to occasional outbursts of rage. And his history explains that because everybody makes sense all the time. And he would occasionally just erupt. And as a little girl, it terrified me. And my mental sense was he never was physical with me. And yet I always had the sense that he wanted to throw me out the window. Now, go figure that. I know that was my emotional response to that experience. And we'd get past it and then I would enjoy him again. And yet, of course, that had a profound impact on every part of me. And I also knew that I did not want to have that. I didn't want to do that, nor did I. He could be critical. He thought it was his job to correct. Mm-hmm. As a dad, he needed to show me the things I was doing wrong. So he could be very critical. And I grew up determined not to be critical.
Yeah.
Except, I discovered as I started to pay attention to my own behavior, for one thing, I could get triggered. And I had to work very, very hard to not become my father. And one thing that I would never say, I'll give you something to cry about. Because I would start to cry and my dad would say, I'll give you something to cry about. And I hated that. So of course I was never going to say it until one day it just jumped out of my mouth and I just went, oh no.
Yeah, all those nevers as a parent. I'll never do this before children. I will never.
Never. And we're being programmed. Programmed. We are programmable beings. And so while I'm telling myself I'm not going to do that, I'm being programmed to do it. So conscious versus unconscious. There's a little irony there. How can you be conscious about what's unconscious? It's sort of not even possible. So it's really probing and investigating what is subconscious. What have I held, but it's below my consciousness level. And with effort, with focus, with certain exercises, I can get to more, not everything, but more of what I've suppressed into the subconscious and bring it into conscious. Then the challenge of interrupting an impulse. The body, it swells with indignation or fear or rage or anger or judgment or whatever it might be. The method for self-regulating so that it's possible for me to not act on that reactively, unconsciously, with rage or with criticism or with an attitude or with judgment or even withholding, all the different ways that we react.
Yeah, I think it's like your intimate partner will trigger parts of you in a way that nobody else has that power. But I would also add that our children can do.
So will your child. Yes.
Right. And then what you're speaking about is this ability to, once we kind of know, we've done the exercises, which are truly the helpful way to uncover some of this or to get clear about it. Even if you know about it, is different to get clear about it. And then what you're talking about is how we learn in the course about, how do I manage my reactivity so that I have long enough between my, the event and I can respond versus react, and that's that space that I need in order to make that conscious choice. And I think that it's so difficult to do that. We talk about, the pause and mindfulness and all of those wonderful things, but really it's challenging when you're triggered.
It's enormously challenging. And sometimes it's impossible. And we get triggered and we act out, and then we have an opportunity to repair. And the repair component is hugely important, sometimes underemphasized, I think, in my opinion. I think for myself, I get so eager about the process that we have, the dialogue process, which involves something that we call mirroring, which is repeating what we've heard rather than responding to what we've heard. And that in itself is enormously self-regulating.
Yes.
And yet I will forget to do that because I've been triggered. And so then the repair process becomes paramount because I'm not going to do it perfectly. This is the one guarantee that I make in my course. I say, attempt to remember every time to say, my one guarantee is you will not do this perfect.
Yeah.
And there are many reasons why you won't do it perfectly. One is because you're human and you're subject to these subconscious impulses and limitations and so forth. And the other is that every child is unique. So that although there are certain principles that are pretty universal, every child has a different set of needs and responses and their physicality. They're unique.
What you bring up is such an important piece that we focus on in our work is attunement, because I'm thinking of 4 grandchildren, and it's easy to see, well, the one is a baby, so it's early, very early about temperament, but he seems pretty chill. Alan's pretty chill. But the 3 other grandchildren, of course, it's easier to be a grandparent and be so aware of when I'm with them and my consciousness around them because I'm not the parent. I'm not doing the full time, not disciplining. I'm not doing all the hard work. I'm just getting the fun part. And I'm thinking about all of their natures and their specialness and how thank goodness, I feel like I'm so proud of my children and their spouses about how attuned they are to their children, but how they're also different. And without that attunement, it would be so hard to meet their needs because they're different. They need different things.
Yeah. It's so difficult, and it's sometimes not even possible. I actually don't, in general, what we want is to meet a child's needs.
Yes.
And in order for them to develop resilience, it's important that not all of their needs are perfectly met.
Yes. Tell me more about that. I want us to talk more about that because I think we have a lot of children who have been saved, or the helicopter parent who means so well, and then they haven't developed the one thing that is really the key factor in raising functioning adults that can exist outside of their parents' world. And without that resilience, we are really setting our kids up to not be successful when we save them. So I really want you to talk more about the resilience, how you build that in your children.
So part of it is backing off and letting them struggle when it's appropriate. You don't want to give a small child power tools, of course. However, if they're struggling and they're frustrated and they're trying something, it's not working, that the inclination to rush in and fix it for them or do it for them or make it easier is profound. When you love a child, you don't want to see them what seems to be suffering, and to be able to make a distinction between when it's appropriate and when it's healthy for that child to feel the frustration and find their way through it and manage to build. That's where resilience is built, when things don't go well. And when I'm left to feel the frustration and either accept that I can't do it or figure out a way with somebody to be there, maybe a coach, maybe a guide, that's the way we can do that. Now, this brings me to the mind of, I happen to be opposed to sleep training, which is very popular, and some people are going to do it anyway. What I believe is that it can be quite damaging to small children to be left crying in their beds until they cry themselves out. And the lesson that I believe that a child learns is that nobody's going to come when I need them.
Yeah.
And it manifests in various ways, but that seems to me not to be a good message. So,
Marcia, that implicit memory you're talking about, when let's just say said child, I'm the mom and I'm been reading my sleep training book and I'm doing the best I can and I want the best for my baby. So I'm letting my baby cry and I'm not tending to them because I have changed the diaper, I have fed them, and I know they're fine and the book tells me they're fine. So I'm going to ignore the crying. And what you're saying is that my baby, in his or her implicit memory in their body, that somehow I'm teaching them that when I'm in distress, nobody comes.
got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and when you have a client that, when you're working with parents who are doing their very best and they think that's the right thing, how do you help gently guide them in the right direction?
Well, something similar to what I heard you just lay out. And I don't have at the ready books. There are some reads that I would recommend that I can go find for you. But
no. Just if you send them to me, I can put them in our summary, and they can learn more about your course. They can learn because I know you have a course coming up. When is that?
I believe it'll be the second Monday in March.
Wow. So they can plan ahead.
8 Mondays.
8 Mondays. And so if I want to sign up for your class, 8 Mondays, and at what time?
3 to 5 Eastern time.
3 to 5 Eastern. So they can just do it online.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they don't have to leave. Yeah. Okay. So that's wonderful to know. I'm really glad that you're offering that course. Where would they sign up?
At IRNA, imagorelationshipswork.com. Or I think it's .com.
Yeah. As soon as you put in Imago Relationships Work, it'll come up.
Yeah. And no spaces or dots or anything, just straight through Imago Relationships Work. And that is the IRNA, Imago Relationships North America website, where there are lots of amazing courses, and that's where that will be posted.
How much is the course?
That's a good question. I don't remember. I don't have that in my...
I feel like...
Isn't that awful?
I don't have around... Yeah, that's okay, because you don't have to handle that part of it. The IRNA takes care of it. But I know it's extremely reasonable. And, I think of all the things that we buy our grandchildren and that their parents buy for them and that children want. And I can't imagine anything. I really can't imagine anything more valuable than this gift for your child, for you to enroll in this class, if not this time, another time. Because I was thinking, go ahead, I'm sorry.
The other thing, Coco, is I want to be sure to say that many of the people who show up are grandparents, as well as parents or godparents, or people who are work therapeutically with children or counsel children or teach children.
Yeah.
Or anyone who was ever a child, him or herself. Because the opportunity to understand your own life challenges and strengths and gifts and all of that is healing.
It is. I took your course. I don't know if you remember this, but when I was still working in the schools and I think I'd completed my clinical training, but this was the first course that I took because I was working with children in the schools, and it was so profound for me. What I loved about it is I've really been trained in a lot of parenting courses over the years. And I think there's a lot of good stuff out there. For example, I recommend on Instagram, Dr. Becky Good Inside. And this is not to diminish her work, but her work is all around techniques and strategies as far as I've observed. And that is all good because it's good strategies. Connected Parents Thriving Kids is about changing your mindset, transformation of how you're seeing your role as a parent. And that to me is the deeper change that we need so that it becomes more automatic how we handle those things that come up. And that
is actually a profound growth opportunity for the parent, grandparent, whomever.
Yes, and therapists and
therapists.
The people. Yeah, because if you can't really understand that deeper context, you're going to stay up here and not get under here. And it's why I'm so drawn to your work. I really appreciate it so much. You were talking about something else that I wanted to just touch back to about resiliency. I had a client once who came in and she was somewhat ashamed, but she was frazzled and she had just finished writing her son's college paper.
Oh boy. If that isn't, and that's not unusual. And I have to confess, Coco, I didn't write any college papers, but when my kids were in junior high and high school, I stepped in more than I would like to have. If I could have done that again, I think my mom helped me sometimes more than was in my best interest. Reflect. I think you mentioned that we have a generation, kind of. There was something that sparked in Southern California, I think, somewhere in California, the idea that children shouldn't suffer at all. Or we should protect them from any kind of suffering. Unfortunately, it became a thing across the country. Probably went beyond the country's borders. That we must intervene so that children don't ever have to experience disappointment or suffering or exclusion or any of those things that can be painful. And I think judgment and attunement are so important in understanding when it's healthy and appropriate to step in and when it's in the child's best interest to just be there and available and not step in, not rescue. Because, the word enable it's used in 12 steps dealing with people who are addicted, that when you enable somebody, really disable them. Enabling is disabling. So it's when I do for you something that you can do for yourself, and appropriately, it is your responsibility to do this thing, and I step in and do it for you. I give you the message that you're incapable and you're broken and you're inept or inefficient. And I can do it, but you can't. And that is a dangerous message for your future.
Buster,
Yes.
I was with one granddaughter recently and she had cleaned something up all by herself and she didn't want to do it, of course, but she did it. And afterwards, the smile about, look what I did,
Yeah.
And, there would have been so much faster, so much easier to step in and just do it myself. Yeah. And I have way more time than parents have, right? Because parents have to get to work. They've got to make the dinner. And sometimes it's just easier to do it for them.
Yeah.
And again, goes back to unconscious versus conscious. And even if you're conscious, you're doing it for them. You have to, it's about faster. And I just want us to really highlight that for parents, that just be aware, am I robbing them of suffering from frustration?
Yeah. And finding their own way. Way.
Yes. And the feeling of accomplishment that we all feel when I do something I don't want to do, I just cleaned my glass globes in my kitchen. It's like, I didn't want to do that. But yet afterwards I went, oh, they look so pretty. I'm so glad that's done. We can't take that from our children.
When we enable them. That's exactly what we do. We rob them of that sense of independence and competence and accomplishment. Those are good feelings. They help build the ability to then take that things on. They build courage. They build determination and a willingness to risk, which is the only way we really do anything. If we learn we're incompetent, it's very damaging.
This parent I'm talking about that wrote the paper, we talked about, her impulse to do that and how she had no help, no guidance growing up, and education was so important to her for her children, and how she had been PTA mom and, all those very, very, very involved parent, and really had unconsciously been doing things for her son so long. And she really, at that point, was so scared for him that he was going to flunk out of school that she couldn't help herself from stepping in again. And that's to your point of, if we don't start this so early with letting a 2-year-old pick up his things, and helping him, guiding him how, that suddenly at 18, they don't have the 18 button push, like, oh, now I can make my own lunch. Oh, now I can do my own laundry because I'm 18. This is such a gradual process. And what you're talking about is really giving these children that opportunity early so that they have the confidence, even if they write the paper and fail, it's their failure. It's their experience.
And being there as a resource is very different from stepping in and taking on the job. Yeah. So if you need help, let me know. Yeah. I'm here. Go to work. Yeah. And then if I try to help them reach out, when I was young, it was the encyclopedia.
Yes, me too. Me too.
But there are so many resources that are available. And for them to develop the skills and the flexibility and the inventiveness to be able to find their way is more important than getting the paper done.
Yeah. So that we get to hold them as a resource, when they don't make the team or, someone has hurt them. We get to hold them through that, but we don't have to, or we should not solve it for them. It's a very delicate dance, isn't it?
There's a little book that I think the author's last name was Miller. That's my best recollection. It was called Enabling. And I remember that she went through all of the these things that you would think of as qualities in terms of kindness and helpfulness. And there are many. And you think, oh, yeah, I want to be all of those things. And she points out how those very qualities of interactive behavior can damage when they become enabling, when they send the message to a child, I can, you can't, instead of you can, and I'm here if you need me.
So I wonder, I'd love this before we go today, if you'd be willing to help our listeners maybe try one or two things so that we can give them some homework if they want to participate and kind of practice something with their kids that might be new or different.
So one thing I would throw out is the stretch, at any age really. But I often in the course, I quote a piece of something from Faber and Maslish, who wrote How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk.
Love that book. Great that book.
And it goes back to Chaim Ganat, who was sort of the first therapist who said, guess what? Children are people. And we need to treat them with the respect that we offer to other humans. So she tells a story of a mom who went to their course. It was taking the class with Faber and Maslish, and came home, and her little boy, who was still quite small, was making the bed. Oh my goodness, he was making an awful mess of making the bed. And because she had just come from the course, her impulse to jump in and say, I'll do it for you. You're clearly incapable. I will do it for you. She bit her tongue. She held back and she said, I see you're making the bed. That's all she said. And she just took a deep breath, let the bed be as scrambled as it was. And the very next day, the same little boy went at the same task, and did a beautiful job. Now, if she had stepped in to do it for him, he probably wouldn't have come back the next day to even try. But he found his own. He was able to evaluate what he did wrong, what he did right, how to do it better, because she stepped back. My request or my inclination to encourage parents, watch for anything that you are doing that needs to be left to the child to do, and take a breath and think about that little boy making his bed.
I love that. And I think it may be from the same book, but I remember a story somewhere about that where the mom sends the child to the room to clean up the room, and that her natural inclination when she walked in, the little bed was made as you described, and there were still toys on the floor. The book had been put away. So she wanted to come in and say, you said you were going to clean your room. Like, there's still toys all over the floor. And what she did, of course, after really practicing what we're talking about, was she walked in. She had to really manage her own reactivity because he knows what it's supposed to look like. And he didn't do that. And she said, I'm so proud of you. You made your bed, and look at those books you put away. They're in order. Thank you so much. And she left and she stayed quiet. And it was a similar response. The little boy suddenly just went and started picking up the rest. He just did it. And it was without all the, lots of lecturing.
Beautiful. And if I can remember it, I'm going to use that story, because I think what is being allowed is that there is that natural inclination in children to please and to follow what it is that is wanted of them, when we allow them to follow that instinct instead of override it and leave them discouraged and feeling wrong and bad. The other thing that you point out and that I could suggest to people is watch for the opportunities, all the opportunities that you can possibly find to see what is right and to acknowledge it. Watch, find them doing something right and accuse them of it. And I think that comes from, that's not original, but it's great. Goldman, it's good practice.
Good practice.
Find them doing something right and accuse them of it. Even the tiniest moment, sitting so still next to your sister. Beautiful.
Yeah. It's funny how when one of them is doing something right too, is noticing, let's just say there's 3 of them in the house and they're all, busy little kids, but one of them is using their indoor voice, right? And the other 2 are not. Instead of saying, stop screaming, it would be like, Harper, you're using your indoor voice. I'm so happy. Thank you for using your indoor voice, because now mommy can concentrate on her work. And then the other kids start to get quiet because you haven't highlighted what they're doing wrong.
So this is the phenomenon that's so valuable to know that you're pointing to, Coco, is that what we give energy to grows.
Yes.
So if you want more of something, pay attention to it. Focus on it. And if you want something to diminish, pull your energy and attention away. So most of us are trained to go negatively at what's wrong to fix it.
Yeah.
Actually gives more energy to it and encourages it to grow, because what do children want more than anything? Our attention. It doesn't matter whether it's lovely attention or nasty attention. They'll take whatever they can get. Yeah. And if you're saying, well, if you're good and quiet, I'm going to look the other way because that gives me a breather, but I'm going to pay attention to you when you're causing trouble, you're going to learn to cause more trouble because that's going to get my attention.
So important. And it makes me think about our couple too. So just a little segue here. When you said that, it really struck me about, where we put our energy, it will grow. And, how, in adult relationships, that it's not that different. Like, I know that my husband he's always trying so hard and wants to please me, right? But my natural impulse is not to thank a grown-up for doing what I think a grown-up should do, right? Like, you just took out the trash. But yet, when I say something like, yeah, thanks for taking that out, what a super sensitive knows I have. And it's so nice that's gone. Thanks for doing that. It means something to people when it's a natural like thing that has to be done in a house, but like when we acknowledge what our partner does for us as well, not only is that good for our relationship, but we're also teaching our children that we pay attention to the things that we're grateful for. Yeah, what's working.
As you tell this story, I get this image of the little boy that lives in your husband, because there is one. There's a little child in each of us. His chest puffing out with pride that he did the good thing.
Yeah.
That when we scold, the little child is shamed. And when we support and recognize, we help heal and fill the space with that positive energy. I wanted to make a quick observation. You talked about a woman who was writing her daughter's school paper, son.
Yeah.
What she did is often what happens. So you grow up in a family where you're neglected, you become over-attentive. You grow up in a family where you're over-attentive, you might go to the other extreme and be pulled way back. The opposite, this is John Bradshaw's quote, is 180 degrees from sick is still sick.
I love that.
And the health is in the middle. And that requires, we tend to be more reactive. You know, if I don't want to be this, then I'll go that. But health and constructive approach and what is helpful, genuinely helpful, is in the middle.
And you know what, you're bringing up something that I did that I'm not proud of, but happy to share, because I think it's about such good effort that mom had to write that paper. Her intentions were good.
Yes.
And yet the impact was, I would guess, not good. I mean, it was,
and there are minions. She is not alone.
No,
a lot.
But what I similar to you with your dad, my mom, had fits of rage and also had this loving side. And so I grew up, and I mean, it was conscious for me to say, just like you said, I am never screaming at my children ever. And I'm not going to over talk. I'm not going to over lecture. I am going to be, a much more calm parent. And so what I think I did a lot right, but I think in this area, I really didn't. And I didn't realize that my silence from holding myself back from saying what I was feeling in my body and in my head was so damaging, because it was the inner rage that they experienced. It was the quiet that they didn't know. What is she thinking? What is she feeling? When is she coming back? Like, I was so happy and now she's not. And so here I am thinking that I am going in my bedroom and calming myself and whatever. And I didn't know. I just didn't know. And so the course and the work that we're talking about is about, okay, so I didn't know. I'm not perfect and I don't pretend to be, but then when I know, I can make a difference. I can work to be better than I was. So that's what I think you and I share with this passion for the parenting piece of this work. Yeah.
It does. The feedback I get is that people really things do get better. They become healthier. And the inner world of the parent is addressed and is healed to some extent.
Yeah.
And that allows for more healthy relationships with the children.
And when you talked about repair, I think this is a good opportunity for us to come back to that, which is, so say I do the rage thing and it's inner rage and I'm in my bedroom and I'm quiet and I realize, like, I'm doing it again. I get to come back out and say, child, I am so sorry. I'm upset right now and I need to tell you why I'm upset and what I need you to do, instead of me going quiet. And I don't want to do that anymore, but it's hard for me, just like you have things that are hard for you. And I'm trying to do better. Can you forgive me?
Yeah.
What a message we send, right?
we let our children understand that we also are on a path of learning and growing and expanding and making mistakes. And that is far more helpful, supportive, and healthy than often parents feel like they have to present the image that they have all the answers and they have it all figured out. And that is not a gift to small children. Certainly you want them to know you're reliable and you are the parent and you're in charge in a way that creates safety for them. And to let them know that you are also on a path of growth and healing and sometimes have to make amends.
Yep, that's it. And when you said that, I was thinking about this is just an interesting thing I've observed in adult relationships is that the impulse to not apologize, to
the difficulty in apologizing.
The difficulty, yeah. Can we talk about that a minute?
I think what I believe happens is that when people have difficulty owning that they did something wrong, they're sitting with some deep shame about their imperfection, that they're frightened of, if I tell you I did something wrong, you'll think I am unworthy. And it's like I'm a total loss. I'm a total loser if I made a mistake, that I've somehow internalized that message. So there's fear, which is usually when we peel down any behavior that's less than constructive and helpful, there's fear. So my fear is you're going to see that I am not who I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be a perfect person because I'm the parent. And so there's fear you'll find me out, that I'm actually flawed. And to be able to embrace that reality, yes, I'm flawed, and sharing that with you appropriately from inappropriate moments and appropriate situations helps you have permission to know that you can also make mistakes and come back from them. And because you made a mistake doesn't mean you are a mistake.
Right. And I wonder too, and I'd love your opinion about this, the other kind of working theory I have in my mind about people that have trouble saying they're sorry. At the deepest part, somehow, there's this shame piece, of course, but I also wonder if, in their family of origin, that saying that you're sorry, admitting you're wrong has a bigger meaning as far as
you're onto something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's an individual who has difficulty saying, and in investigation, what is discovered is that when this man was a boy and would attempt an apology with his mom, that would open up the floodgates. Yes, not only that, and furthermore, and she'd lay it on him. So he learned not to open those floodgates by daring to say, I'm sorry. As an adult, it's hard for him to say, I'm sorry, even when he is.
And that when you tell the truth, you get in trouble.
Yes.
Who the hell would tell the truth?
It's a lesson. Don't tell the truth. And actually, this is exactly why children lie when we consciously or never consciously, when we unconsciously set up a situation that makes it dangerous for them to tell the truth, they're going to make up a story.
Yeah. Because it's not safe. And that is something that, I know in your work, you're so dedicated to is safety. And would you tell us a little bit more? And then I know that you need to go, but I really want to hear your thoughts about keeping safety in the forefront. Will you tell us about that?
So I think safety is a relative term, that part of the way we can create a safe space for our children, to the extent we can possibly create predictability, that we are not unpredictable, relatively, not perfectly predictable. So that means that there's some structure. The fact that children need limits. I do believe that often parents have a misguided notion that I put limits in place because I need them as the parent, and they're a difficult thing for children. But children actually feel safer when there are clear, predictable limits. And that doesn't mean you can't come to me and talk. I will hear you, and I won't make you wrong for what you're wanting, what you're needing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And I will let you know what is okay. and what is not in our family. So I think safety is largely, greatly served by limits, along with being loving. Loving limits is an approach, and I'm not thoroughly in support of that approach to parenting, but love and limits has some really good components. And those two words, just the title, that putting love together with clear, predictable limits and structure in giving the love that heals, safety and structure are really important to provide by consistency, predictability, and calm connection.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think, we really look at this topic of parenting, and I think what is helpful to me, hearing what you've shared, is that you've really created a way for us to leave this podcast and go home and kind of rethink a little bit about, what am I doing that I really like, that I think is really good about my parenting, and what is like one thing or two things that I want to maybe re-examine. And we know about the course. However, if that's something that you're unable to do right now, reading the book, Giving the Love That Heals, would be a wonderful way to begin looking at your own parenting style and what you might want to change. And your practical suggestion about looking for what is right, that you're catching them doing the right thing, and then sometimes amplifying that and really focusing on what you want to grow in your children, I think is really something important you've shared. And that idea of creating safety with our predictability and how to give that safety to our children so that they know there are loving limits, and that, yes, the logical consequence, you spilled your milk, I'll show you where the rags are, let's mop this up, because then they start to make the connection that you aren't doing something to me, punishing me. Actually, I spilled milk and now I have to clean it up. What a simple solution. But it is that loving kind of limits. You can't just toss your milk across the room. But if you do, here's what we do about it.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add before we sign off? I've really enjoyed this so much.
Me too, Coco. I don't think so. I mean, there may be, but at the moment it feels maybe I'll add a sweet story that is bubbling up for me. And it is about my father, that he lived till his late 80s. And close to that time, we had a moment. My dad had much wounding. And so he would tend to go in Giving the Love That Heals. Harble talks about children needing a wall and a mirror. And my dad would go from being angry. If he was at all felt like he had done the wrong thing, he would go into shame. And that left sort of the middle ground there was nothing there for me to push against, because if I would push, he would drop or he would go up. He would either go up into anger or drop into shame. Now, that was the times when we were at challenging moments, not when I was sitting on his lap and when he was delighting in my paintings and so forth. But I never was able to address that until his late years. And there was a moment where I think my brother made the observation that I always tangled with my dad. And I did. I think there's something in me wanted him to be his better self. I wanted to be his therapist. I just didn't know it.
You saw something in him that he didn't know he had.
Yeah.
He had it, but you saw it.
Right.
The story of you, Marcia.
So when this was brought up, my dad dropped into that shame place and he said something like, "Oh, I was a terrible father."
Oh.
Said, "No, Dad, that's not the truth." And the next day I sat next to him on a bench in my sister's home. And I said, "Dad, I want to talk to you about what happened yesterday. You were by no means a terrible dad. And I love you very much. What was hard for me was when sometimes you would just erupt and go into a rage. And I was a little girl and I was frightened. And what I needed from you was I didn't get it." And he heard me and he said to me, I was struggling at work and I would come home and I would take it out on you.
Oh,
And that wasn't right. And I'm so sorry. So that healing moment has gone a long way.
so also what you're telling us is that it's not too late to
Never
heal.
too late.
So even if we're having in our adult relationship, if my daughter wants to tell me about something I've done, that if we make that space for that to happen, like your dad did, that could be really healing.
What it made clear to me is that it's not that he was unaware. He just did not know how to address it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he did not, certainly never wanted to do any harm.
Oh, and you knew that, I think, always.
Knew that.
I guess you hearing it, there was something different about that.
There was
he was
something
able
different.
to, yeah.
It was, my childhood was filled with love. It just didn't have a lot of safety. So
much love.
So
thank you for sharing that beautiful story with us. And I feel like it's important right now to say the relationship blueprint unlock your power of connection. That story tells the story of the blueprint because it was in your dad's willingness to talk with you, right?
And to listen to me.
And to listen and to acknowledge that then that unlocks something within you that could heal. And it's so powerful when you describe that connection you felt with your dad before he left us. It's so beautiful. So I welcome all of you to think more about this kind of connection that you want with the people you love, whether they're children, your partner, your parent, your friend, and that this potential is there and that potential is within us and it's within the people we love. And we thank you for being with us today. I love that we want you back on the show because we can't talk enough about parenting. I feel like today's parenting, I guess my mother must have said the same thing, but it feels to me like being a parent today is so much more challenging than what I had when I was a mom.
I think that's real.
It feels that way.
Because of social media, it absolutely is.
Yeah, it's just that the culture we live in, it feels to me, I'm not a parent of a young child, but in my experience watching it feels like it's really hard. And then we didn't even get to talk about co-parenting in families where there's divorce or even what co-parenting looks like when you both have these stories. And then if they're not conscious, how they interfere with the connection, not only in the couple, but how that impacts kids. So there's so much more to talk about. And I really hope you'll join me again.
I would love it.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. You're so welcome. Goodbye, everybody. And we're so happy you're back. This is episode 1 of season 2 of the Relationship Blueprint, Unlock Your Power of Connection. And we can't wait to see you again next week. We took a little hiatus over the holidays to be with family, and I'm really glad that I did. I feel fresh and rejuvenated to bring more wonderful guests and information so that we can all feel better and live a better life. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk soon.